Genshin Impact, my beloved, my hated, my toxic ex. Why are you here today? Well, one of you lovely viewers suggested pairing up twist characters with visions, and this idea has been keeping me up at night ever since. So, we are gathered here today not to watch my 4.3 launcher struggle to update to 5.8, but to discuss which Genshin Impact visions the Twist Boys would receive if they existed in that universe. Now, it's been a very, very long time since I've played Genshin, and my memories are about as existent as those who share them. So, there will be lore inaccuracies in my reasonings because my opinions will not be informed by any Fontaine or Natlan content, since I haven't, played the game for those batches. I may play them in the future, depending on how y'all act in the comments. And in such a case, I don't want the story spoiled for me, so please take my picks and considerations in this video with a grain of salt since I am not working with complete knowledge. Since I'll still be talking about both games, including their stories and characters, there will be spoilers for both TWSTed and Genshin content, so consider this your spoiler warning. And if you have something you would like to see me cover, either in a video or on stream, leave a comment down below or join our Discord community and drop your idea into the suggestion channel there. I can't promise that I'll get to it, but who knows, perhaps one day your idea will be featured in a video just like this one. With all of that out of the way, it's time for us to begin our consideration in earnest, starting with our Heartslable boys. Ace, 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 it is always Ace, and today he's getting a Pyro vision, because I can't really see him resonating with any other element. If my memory is correct, which it most likely isn't, it is not actually the Archons who give out the visions, but rather it is the nature of the desire that creates the elemental connection, or something to that effect. Animo, for example, is tied to the concept of freedom, so those who have desires that resonate with freedom seem to be the ones receiving Animo visions. Pyro Archon may represent war, but the Pyro element, I think, connects to those who have a contagious passion, and Ace seems like that kind of guy to me. He's not really focused, nor does he have a solid idea of what he wants to do in the future, but he does know what is right and wrong, and he has strong opinions about those things. He's not going to let himself or his ideals get trampled on either, and his passion for his perceived truth is what spurns him to challenge Riddle in Book 1. Heck, it's what inspires him to punch Riddle in that final confrontation. And I think if Ace had a bit more direction, he'd be able to more effectively wield his passion. Fire is an element that spreads, but it does so almost indiscriminately, and I think given how young Ace is and his hesitations towards the future, this aspect of the element works really well for where he's at when we meet him in the game. Sure, he can adapt to a variety of social situations and understand social cues well, but he doesn't always act on these things properly. Sure, he has the smarts and is capable of achieving great things, but he lacks the focus and motivation to do so. He tries to weasel his way out of things rather than embrace his potential, almost as if he's afraid to shine too brightly. But at the same time, he can't help himself from jumping into situations feet first if they offend his sensibilities. When that happens, there is no fear of getting burned. There is no fear of offense, and you are going to know his thoughts whether you like it or not. And he's not going to allow himself to be silenced in those scenarios. I think giving him Pyro allows Ace to have these heated moments, embracing his spark, while also leaving room for his uncertainty. Perhaps his wish is hidden deep within his heart, and even he doesn't fully understand what it is. He just knows that he has a vision now and he's going to cause chaos with it. But maybe with a bit more introspection, he can come to a deeper understanding of his connection with the element, and in the process come to understand himself. For now, though, the slightly spicy redhead is content to hurl fireballs at Grimm and whoever else tries to tussle with him. Deuce, on the other hand, is a little more level-headed, a bit more introspective, and because of this, I think he might end up with a Geo vision. I originally wanted to give him a Hydro vision since it would contrast well with Ace, and I think Deuce has a generally calm demeanor that suits water, but it just didn't really seem to fit properly with the rest of his personality. Given some of the rumors about Cauldron Deuce that we hear in White Rabbit Fest, it almost seems like Delinquent Deuce kept the peace in town between different factions of miscreants. During the star sending event, we hear from Deuce himself that he wants to be a police officer, a keeper of the peace, and one of his primary goals at NRC is becoming an honor student to increase his odds for this future career. Throughout the story, he is much more of a defensive guy, protecting his friends from harm, and his special magic even manifests during one of his protective bouts. I think because he's so focused on protection, especially of those he holds dear, both physically and mentally, since he doesn't really want his mom to cry over him again, Geo just felt like the right element to give him. It's one that allows him to shield himself and others, to put obstacles in the way of those who would otherwise seek to do harm, and maybe even reflect these obstacles at his foes like his special magic does. Geo Team Resonance also impacting shield efficiency and damage taken just reminded me so much of Deuce, so it is here that I will leave him for this consideration. Trey, on the other hand, in my opinion, shouldn't have a vision at all, because he's just so normal, and normal people in Genshin don't have visions. But he is also a vice house warden and a darn good baker, so I guess he's getting a pass along with a Dendro vision here. Dendro is associated with enlightenment and knowledge, and I think Trey being in the science club is enough evidence to support him in this area. But even his attempts to be normal, I think, aid him here too. I believe Trey to be putting on this normal mask to purposefully obscure himself and his abilities, so that he doesn't have to deal with the ire of his classmates. The guy clearly can excel when he puts the effort in, and he's clearly smart enough to cultivate special strawberries and other crops specifically to further his baked goods. Yet even in these pursuits, he denies his own talents and claims to be normal. Just your average Joe. Just a silly little guy. One that totally doesn't have an alleged tooth collection in his dorm. This camouflage is incredibly smart given the environment of NRC. Jealous folks are everywhere, and as soon as you stand out, you've got a target on your back. Since Trey has to deal with a tumultuous Riddle and dorm mates that are uncooperative, it makes sense that he wouldn't want any more issues to plague him. This may not be a conventionally smart move, nor is it really emphasized by the game at any point in time, but I think it's a likely reason that Trey is so insistent that he is normal. And this sort of move connects very well to the intelligence of Dendro, or at least what I believe it is meant to evoke. Maybe this vision will even help him in his culinary plant pursuits by allowing him to craft even better and more delicious strawberries and other little treats to incorporate in his baking. So it could serve that purpose as well. Now then, we've got Cater, Heartstable's resident social media star and sad boy. Because of this, I think it's only fitting for Cater to receive an Animo vision. Venti is out here collecting the broken, beaten, and damned, and while Archons aren't the ones handing out these powers, there does seem to be a moody theme within the Animo boys, one which I think resonates with Cater. While he appears to be bubbly, extroverted, and largely unbothered on the surface, there is a depth to him that can be overlooked if one only views him superficially. Cater has a surprising amount of emotional intelligence and common sense, wild qualities for a would-be influencer, but qualities that round out his character well. Couple this with his conflicting feelings about the future, his own sense of self, and we've got a bingo for an Animo boy. Animo is an element that's largely dominated by the concept of freedom, with multiple vision wielders actively choosing their own freedom or coming to terms with themselves and their emotions, thus freeing them from said emotions. Cater seems to want to break free of his family, to step out of the shadow of his sisters, and I think this desire is leaving him conflicted. I don't think he knows where he wants to go or what he wants to do, or at least he's not quite conscious of these desires, so he can't fully realize them. However, they are still there and they are still a part of him, and perhaps during his time at NRC, even though he's not fully free of his negative emotions, he might be starting to realize his true desires and work towards his freedom. I can see his vision manifesting right before or soon after coming to the school, and I think the light and airy vibe of wind fits Cater's bubbly persona. The depth is there if you look for it, and it meshes well with various Genshin characters of the same element, including the Archon. But to the average passerby, there is still enough superficial connection for the resonance to make sense, and right now I think that's enough for Cater. He'll work out his uncertain emotions someday. He's got a lot of time given how young he is, and eventually he may be able to fully embrace this elemental connection. Now then for Riddle. Is it even a question? He, of course, is Pyro. I cannot envision him as any of the other elements. He simply just is fire. Not only does he already command fire, but he wears red, has red hair, and turns red when his anger takes over. He'd fit in perfectly with the other Pyro character designs on principle, and as previously discussed, Pyro is an element that seems to favor passion without a true, defined, sole purpose. I think Riddle's anger in some ways can fit this bill. However, his underlying desire to break free of the rules and the strict structure that's governed his entire life resonates a bit more strongly with this element in my mind than the namesake of freedom, Animo, which seems a little counterintuitive on the surface. From a very young age, Riddle was forced to fit a certain mold, and anytime he deviated, he received punishment. So controlling was his mother that she even picked out his favorite color for him, and for a child so very young to have this decided for them is tragic. While Riddle desires freedom from these shackles, he's also scared that doing so will cause more harm than good, so I don't think he could fully embrace Animo. Instead, I think there's a bit of rage in him, a spark, so to speak, that wants to incinerate these walls to ensure that no harm can come to him or others because of them. And that is very Pyro. It's not light and airy, it is dark and grungy. It is not this enlightenment, it is a lashing out in a way. And I can see Riddle's desires manifesting somewhat similarly to Xinyan and her dream of breaking up tradition by bringing rock to the world at large. Riddle struggles a lot with freeing himself from his preconceived notions, from the rules that have governed his life, but perhaps during or after his overblot, he would have obtained this vision as an acknowledgement of his desires to break free in an uncontrolled and wild way. Even post-overblot, Riddle isn't entirely free. He still has some hesitation regarding disobeying the rules, and even though he's getting better, it's still a rough road, one that still has a lot of emotional outbursts. I think even in these, the Pyro element can also be found, so that's what he's going to be getting here. Moving on from Heartstable, we have Savannah Claw, and next up in our roster is Jack, our resident tsundere. I think this prickly cactus deserves a cryovision to help him maintain his image and possibly keep him cool, because the poor boy cannot handle the heat. There are some rather obvious parallels between Jack and this element since he grew up in a cold weather area, one that was partial to snow, so he's likely used to winter. There are remarks made during the second Fairy Gala about Jack even training in the snow, as well as several nods to his snowy hometown in items that he owns. These things can superficially tie Jack to this element since its motifs already surround him, and his seemingly cold attitude towards the player and other characters suits this element too. However, underneath this icy exterior is a heart of gold, and Jack truly does care about those he respects or loves. Love is supposed to be the Tsaritsa's domain, but in English, love is a very loose concept. The word can be used in a variety of contexts for a variety of reasons, and therefore has numerous meanings. And the type of love the Cryo Archon is meant to represent is purposefully obscured by this uncertainty, I think. In my mind, based on the various playable Cryo characters' backstories, it seems like the kind of love that resonates with this element is a mix between pragma and agape. Each character seems to have a sense of duty and a love for something outside of themselves, and this love is deep enough to give them purpose. Diana has a love for dismantling the alcohol industry, Eula for vengeance, Rosaria for justice, and so on and so forth. And each of these can be linked to a love found outside of themselves. Diana's long-standing desire to dismantle the alcohol industry, for example, stems from her love for her drunken father and desire for him to get better. Jack does not have as tragic a love, per se, but he does still have a sense of duty, a sense of justice, and I think these things stem from his concern for others. Sure, he tries to deflect his care, but at the end of the day, he partners up with us in Book 2 because of his concern for Leona. He stays by our side in Book 3 due to his concern for us. I think Jack's moral code, while still self-serving, is meant to make him a role model for others, perhaps even a role model for his siblings, and I think that stems from his love for those he seeks to influence. It may not be the strongest connection, but it is a connection nonetheless, so Jack will still be getting cryo here. Yet again, Venti is recruiting all of the sad and broken boys, although in this case I think he mixed up broken with broke. But since Venti's usually plastered, it's understandable. Ruggie is in fact broke, and he has every reason to be sad, although the more I've gotten to know him, the more positive his attitude becomes. And overall, I think he's a really delightful ball of sunshine. So delightful that I almost gave him Pyro because I feel like he really starts to shine post-book 2, and particularly in his dream in book 7. However, he is also Monsieur Dandelion, and what could be more emblematic of Mondstadt and the Animo Archon than the Dandelion? That, and I feel like a lot of connections can be made between Ruggie and Venti. Both are broke boys. Both do whatever they can to hustle enough coin for their various endeavors, and both keep a positive attitude despite the horrors they've endured. Perhaps a future video will delve into these parallels a bit deeper, but for now, I feel like this is enough to connect him to Animo, and even if it isn't, this silly little guild quest where you have to blow leaves away for coins certainly is. Ruggie would 100% be down for this. In fact, I feel like Ruggie has absolutely taken on cleaning jobs like this before, and while in those commissions you do also have to use Hydro, the Animo piece is much more impressive, honestly, and I can see Ruggie putting this vision to fantastic use in this specific scenario. I've been out of Genshin's story for a long time, but from what I remember, one's dream or desire is what connects them to the element they receive, regardless if it's the one they want. Like Noelle really wanting an Animo vision, but being given a Geo vision instead, since it resonated with her desire to protect the Knights of Favonius and Mondstadt, and her dedication better manifested with that element subconsciously. The desire we see in Book 7 manifested in his dream seems like a seeking of freedom. Freedom from financial and social restraints, a future where hyenas would be treated better and where no one would have to go hungry. Money cannot buy this sort of happiness, but it can get you out of a parking ticket, and while Ruggie's idealized world is far nobler in its pursuit of freedom, the mechanics are largely the same. So I think subconsciously Ruggie would have likely resonated better with Animo given this, so that's what I've decided to give him here. Leona is going to be the one getting Dendro in Savannah Claw, as I think this would be a very ironic vision for him to have, yet it's still one that makes sense to me. The Dendro Archon is one of wisdom and knowledge, and while those two things on paper are very Scarabia core, Leona's whole shtick is that he's got the brains to go with his bronze. He's a chess buff, a strategist, and while his plans are sometimes flawed, I think he really understands and seeks out academic challenge, and that could help him resonate with this element. His special magic is way more geo-focused, although I can also see it being Dendro if it's a result of his defiance. There is a blight that affects various parts of Sumeru during the main story of Genshin, and there is a whole area dedicated to a thriving civilization that was turned to dust, and I think both of these things can artificially be connected to Leona. Perhaps he got his vision when he was still young, and perhaps in trying to use it, he dusted some flowers instead of making them bloom, and the palace guards and workers spread their gossip about a defective vision behind his back. If it were Geo, I suppose they could still resent him for his destruction like they do in the game, but the resentment Leona holds towards himself and towards his homeland would have a nicer bite if it also included the irony of Dendro, no? I think it would be much easier for him to be distraught over not being able to use his vision quote-unquote correctly, or at least what others would have deemed correct, and that could add another complex layer to his story, especially if his brother and his family at large were also Dendro vision holders. Felina spreading greenery across the savannah while Leona can only destroy it. How deliciously tragic. Leona desires a prosperous future, and I think this vision would have resonated with that desire, but because he lacks the confidence, it can't manifest its power in the conventional sense, and rather than be defeated by this, Leona found other uses for it. His dorm card is all flora, after all, so over time he probably figured out how to do some things. He just can't make miracles like his brother allegedly can. Whether he likes it or not, Leona is tied to nature, the Sunset Savannah is tied to nature, and that creates a part of himself that he can't really escape from. And I think after fully embracing his darkness in his dream, he might be able to find a way forward from this and truly achieve greatness. And perhaps, in that process, fully embrace his Dendro vision. But there's still a lot of time between now and then, which gives us a lot of time to talk about Octavanel. And first up in this dorm is Floyd. Floyd, in a lot of ways, reminds me of Child. And while a future video, again, may or may not dive into this connection, this video is going to assign him a Hydrovision. Floyd is such a chaotic little being, and while I love that for him, I couldn't really pin down any specific element for him besides the obviously connected Hydro. Animo could work because of the freedom, but it doesn't really seem very practical for a merman to have. Not that this would stop the vision from manifesting, and honestly, that kind of chaos is exactly what Floyd represents. But I also feel like Floyd is the most chill with being in his mer form out of the three, and between switching forms, since he doesn't hesitate to transform multiple times during Vargas camp. And his very nature as a merman does tie him to water, so having a Hydrovision also doesn't seem too out of pocket for him. Hydro also being the element of justice is also just kind of hilarious when it related to Floyd, because why? How? Floyd does have a moral code of sorts, and he is still fairly loyal to those he cares for, but justice is not the word I would use to describe him. Jack maybe, but Floyd no. I suppose he does himself justice by listening to his heart and following his desires indiscriminately, so I'll just leave that for him here. There are also some thematic contrasts that I wanted to keep with Floyd's vision, like him and Riddle being complete opposites, and him and Jade working together well, and Hydro worked out best in this regard for both scenarios. It puts him directly opposite of Riddle, and it'll work nicely with Jade's vision, and even eventually Azul's. But there is one other part of water that I think really suits Floyd's overall character, and that's adaptability. His moods shift, he changes constantly, yet he also remains the same. The form of him changes, but the substance doesn't. Water is like this. Hydro can take on any form it wants to, frogs, birds, fish, whatever. It can be used to harm or to heal. It can help or hinder. It can be everything and nothing, and this concept is something that I think resonates deeply with this aspect of Floyd's character. Today, he may be a fair-weather basketball player. Tomorrow, he'll have remembered hundreds of mushrooms, and the day after that, he'll be neither of those things and then some. This constant shifting, this constant flux, I think is just very Hydro. And these thoughts are what ended up solidifying this as his vision for me. Now, Jade may not be an electric eel, but I really cannot envision him with any other element besides electro. Imagine a merperson that is able to accurately and effectively send electric shocks underwater without getting themselves or their pals electrocuted. That's terrifying, and if there ever was a defining word for Jade, it would be terrifying. Plus, the color of the vision fits right in with Octavanel's aesthetic too, so it's got that going for it. Honestly, this pairing was just a vibe at first sight, because as soon as I started this consideration, Jade just jumped out to me as an electro character, and it took me a bit to figure out why. After all, the realm of eternity doesn't really seem to suit him outside of the Zen aspects, but the more I thought about it, the more his meticulous nature seemed to fit this. His desire and plots are methodically executed, and I think electro is an element that's well suited to this. Lightning is intense, frightening, fast, but also typically strikes at a specific point. It has a goal, and it takes down anything in its path to meet that goal, and it does so efficiently. Jade, for his part, is very efficient, with one of his duo lines even hinting at this. And I think he takes great care in creating a route to his goal. It may not be a super direct path, at least not to onlookers, but there is a methodology to his madness, and he almost always gets his prey. Waiting, setting things up, taking one's time, all these can relate to eternity, no? There is no time limit in eternity. There is no need to rush in eternity. Its very nature makes it infinite, and mores, as Floyd notes, take their time with their prey. Jade is the best example we have of this at the current moment, although I suppose patience is probably a better word for him than eternity. Still, the point persists. I also just like the idea of the three Octavanel characters working really well together mechanically, the twins specifically. Floyd, in his reckless abandon, applies hydro status to everyone and anything within range, and Jade merely snaps his fingers at the closest one to create a chain effect, shocking and immobilizing every single attacker. This, too, is terrifying, and this style of battle I think suits the two of them very well. Azul, though, is a little less devious and a little less obviously dangerous, but make no mistake, his cryovision is still very strong. I think given the cold seas that he comes from and his cold-hearted business dealings, it seems fitting to give him this type of vision. I know I talked a lot about the type of love I think these visions resonate with given my understanding of them, and how that love is more community or goal-focused, but I think in Azul's case, this is still true to an extent. However, I think there's another layer that steps outside of this definition. Technically speaking, he helps all sorts of poor unfortunate souls. Technically, his goals do involve the community in helping others achieve their dreams. And he is tireless in this pursuit. However, I wouldn't call Azul's brand of helping very love-based. Instead, I think there is a desire to be loved in Azul's story, a desire to fit in or be accepted for the parts of yourself that you can't change, and perhaps this is what caused the cryovision to manifest. Some of the cryo users in Genshin are outcasts, so to speak, like Csilla is a fallen noble and Rosaria is a very bad nun. Both of them get shunned for things they can't exactly help, at least in my recollection, and I think Azul shares this similarity with them. He was shunned by his peers because of things outside of his control, his octopus nature. He couldn't help but be slow, he couldn't help but spew ink, and it's these same qualities that he's learned to weaponize. I think in that process he would have manifested this vision alongside with his special magic, and since then he's been a force to be reckoned with. Regardless of whether he's partnered with one or both of the twins, they'll have decent elemental resonance together. I can also see Azul being more in a support role, letting the twins dish out the damage since they are faster and more agile, while Azul sits back and heals or buffs them depending on the specifics of his kit. I can't imagine Azul as anything other than a catalyst wielder too, so being farther in the back away from the action suits this as well. Plus, in this universe, Azul can act as an ice machine for the lounge, and he can make all sorts of fancy ice cubes with Floyd for all the fancy drinks, and I think that is delightful. And it is with this thought that we will be ending off our consideration for today. This script got a little too long, a little too fast, and so I'm gonna have to cut it in half. But I hope that y'all enjoyed nonetheless. As always, I'm curious about your opinion, so please let me know down below if you think my picks are accurate or if you think there are other visions better suited. While you're there, please let me know if you liked this video and want more content like it. And if comments aren't your thing, you could always like and subscribe instead. Now, before you go, I just have to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.